Hi, I'm Attorney Callihan. I am the District Attorney in Cambria County, Pennsylvania, and I'm here today to talk with you about a protocol that we have developed here in Cambria County that we hope will be used statewide. I wanted to make sure that we were in compliance with the mandates set forth in the Violence Against Women Act. To that end, we developed a protocol here in our county, and it's an Anonymous Sexual Assault Protocol. And what this did was bring together many agencies throughout the county, and we formed what we call a Sexual Assault Response Team. The Sexual Assault Response Team forms a circle of support surrounding the victim. The team consists of Victim Services, Cambria County Law Enforcement, the Cambria County District Attorney's Office, Women's Help Center, and Conemaugh Health System Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners. Each has a unique role which may include responding to and caring for victims, investigating the crime, or holding offenders accountable. Working together, these responders form the Sexual Assault Response Team, helping to recover a sense of peace and security in the life of the survivor and the community at large. Because when agencies collaborate and put their heads together, the results are always better.
A sexual assault victim experiences a great deal of trauma after the sexual assault. What an advocate can provide is highly specialized training that allows us to support the victim through every step of the process. We can work with victims to calm their fears, to help them understand the process of what's going to happen, and to really work with them afterward to get through the trauma of being victimized. Whenever an advocate is called, we come to the hospital with the victim. We can sit with them through the rape exam, and then also be with them every step of the process afterward, through the interviews with police, through the prosecution of the crime, and then long after for counseling and supportive services.
If you take a look at the Sexual Assault Response Team as a whole, if you focus on the will, it's kind of symbolic. You have the victim in the center of the will, and you have all the different components of the SART that are ready to help out the victim. It's important for that victim to reach out to every one of those components within the SART for the SART to work. The SART is designed as a will, and for that will to move forward, you have to have everybody on the same page, and that's where it starts with the victim reaching out to every section.
The very first person on the front line will be most likely the SANE nurse. We now have these amazingly trained people who have gone through hours of extra training to be prepared to not only support the person physically throughout the examination and take the evidence correctly, but also to emotionally support them. And one of the first things that the SANE nurse will do is contact the victim service person. That's important to further handle their emotional as well as their later on their judicial needs in handing them off to us. The advocates from the victim services are vital in all of this, and it's important that they get that first contact with the victim at the hospital so that they can be supported through the exam if they choose. They can talk to someone afterwards. They can ask questions about what will happen.
The incident is traumatizing to the victim, but the exam also can be traumatizing. This victim she's been violated in the most terrible way another human being can be. And she comes to the hospital and she has to sit down, talk to somebody about what happened using very descriptive terms. She's not allowed to go to the bathroom. She's not allowed to have anything to eat or drink. She's not allowed to change her clothing or shower until the exam is over. And what the exam entails is we take the victim to a private exam room in the emergency department. She needs to get undressed on a piece of white paper to collect any evidence that may fall off of her body or her clothing. And she cannot do this in private. She has to do this in front of the nurse, who is a stranger to her. We take her clothing. We look at her body. If there are injuries, we take pictures. If there are bite marks or anything of that nature, we take a swab and swab over that to try to collect any DNA evidence. And she's in there with only the victim's advocate and the nurse examiner. Her family, her friends, her support system, it is actually better for them not to be in the room with her, because it also can be traumatic for the families and friends of these victims to see what they have to go through.
From a prosecutor standpoint, it's important that not only do we have the evidence collected from the assault by the SANE nurses properly placed in the proper containers, all of the evidence from fingernail scrapings to hair samples from about the body and fluid samples collected, and that be used later in court. The evidence collection is vital.
There are special kits that come with all the equipment we need in them. We collect the evidence, we let air dry, we seal it in special envelopes. It then goes in a kit, is sealed with evidence tape, and we hold on to that until the police officer gets there. That evidence kit never leaves our possession until it's handed over to the police officer.
Law enforcement and other responders should contact a rape crisis counselor immediately when presented with a rape victim, because a rape crisis counselor can truly be your greatest ally. We are able to provide the support to the victim that will allow them to participate fully in the prosecution. We're able to calm their fears and work with them to provide information that is going to assist you in your investigation.
In cases of intimate partner sexual assault, it's essential that the Women's Help Center be called. We have counselors and advocates that are there for victims. That's our job. That's what we do. We want to serve the victim, and it's very important that we be notified in any case of intimate partner sexual assault.
The victim's advocate can be a law enforcement officer's greatest asset, along with the victim in this case, making them understand what the court procedure is, how many times that they may have to make an appearance to court, and that they are holding that offender accountable, not only for what had happened to them, but potentially for someone else.
We work with a variety of different agencies, including the District Attorney's Office, the police departments, the Women's Help Center, and the hospital, in addition to other agencies throughout the county, to really make sure that we're meeting that victim's needs right from the get-go.
The next person that we become involved with after the SANE nurse and the victim service advocate have met with them is the police officer. The police officer will make the initial interview with the victim, and then they contact us. So once we talk to the police officer, sometimes we go together to interview the victim. Sometimes the police officer has already interviewed the victim before we are able to come on the scene. The officer's role in this is so very important because they can ask the technical questions. They know exactly the kind of questions that need to be asked to help us do our job better, and also the kind of questions that help make the victim comfortable and able to answer the questions. So their role in this is very, very important.
Law enforcement has to understand to reach out to a prosecutor is a good option when you're dealing with a sexual assault. The reason for it is the fact that that prosecutor can work hand in hand with law enforcement. That case can be tailored to that prosecutor's liking, so when that case goes to court, they better understand what evidence is needed, what other interviews have to be done, and what other corroborative evidence can be found so they can investigate the case and prosecute.
When a victim of intimate partner sexual violence is residing with the offender, that makes her life extremely difficult because she's living with somebody that she may be dependent upon financially, her children may be dependent upon also, and to be able to report that she has been sexually assaulted is a very, very difficult decision to make. And one of her main concerns is her safety.
Oftentimes, our victims are afraid to report or not willing to report, meaning that they'll go to the hospital for treatment and they'll want some kind of medical intervention, but they're not certain that they want to proceed forward with judicial intervention, meaning pressing charges against the individual and bringing the courts into the situation. So what we have implemented now is an anonymous reporting program. And the anonymous reporting, basically in a nutshell, means that these victims have a choice. It will encourage them to go and get the medical treatment that is required, and they will be able to report to our trained SANE nurses that they have been involved in a sexual assault. The SANE nurse will be able to collect any evidence that may be there. Once that evidence is collected, it will be transported to our local police department where it will be stored. However, there is no police report of note made. No victims' names are mentioned, no perpetrators' names are mentioned. It is completely anonymous.
It's identified only with a number and letters. That information is stored in our department in a logbook in a locked cabinet.
It is only connected to our victim through a number that is generated through the hospital, which will be attached to the essential sexual assault kit, collection kit that is taken, what people typically call a rape kit. But that will be kept and stored for 180 days.
The examples that I've used, for instance, we may have a college student who comes here to Cambria County and goes to one of our local universities. And let's say she's out on a date and she's date raped. And she's very apprehensive about going forward. This is a program now where she can go to the hospital, she can talk to trained professionals, and she can have the evidence collected that we need to, if we are going to prosecute later. But yet she can take the time she needs to figure out in her own mind whether to come forward. And our hope is, maybe she goes home for spring break. Maybe she was worried her parents wouldn't support her. And then she goes home and finds out she has a world of support behind her. This time period, this 180-day period, would allow her the time to change her mind and come forward later and say, you know what, I'm ready, I want to prosecute. Another scenario where I can see this being beneficial is in a situation where maybe the victim is married to the person who sexually assaulted her. And at the point where the rape happens, maybe she has a couple kids and she's dependent financially on this man, and she's worried about her safety and the safety of her children. In this 180-day period, if we can hook her up with the victim advocates anonymously, and she can get the strength she needs to break out of that relationship, she may come forward later and have the tools that she needs and the strength that she needs to get on the witness stand and say what happened and get out of that relationship for good and let us prosecute.
And what that offers the victim is the ability to be more comfortable because we're more comfortable with each other. It helps the victim to handle those emotions and allows us to really get involved with that person and make them feel more at ease.
However, if at the termination of the 180 days, they feel that they're not ready or able or willing to go forward with any kind of law enforcement involvement or prosecution, then at the end of the 180 days, that rape kit will be destroyed. Now, just so that it's known, that doesn't mean they can't come a year later and decide to prosecute the rape. We just won't have the evidence that was collected at the initial point of report to the hospital.
As victim advocates, we are extremely passionate about the work we do and want to work with everyone else on the team to really benefit the victims.
Working with the prosecutor's office, one of the most important things that I found is that when I go to meet a victim for the very first time, if there is a victim advocate sitting with that person, I literally breathe a sigh of relief. I know at that point that that individual is being taken care of in ways that I'm not able to do. That someone is there literally holding their hand, giving them a pat on the back, helping them through all of the emotional strain and stress and pain that sexual assault brings on to that person.
One of the things we hear so often from our victims is that the most important part of their healing process was how somebody responded the first time they told, how they spoke, and what kind of support they gave them right from the beginning. So having the sexual assault response team in Cambria County will provide a coordinated response that will help facilitate that healing right from the beginning by providing that support for the victim.
I know we've presented you with a lot of information in this program, but if you leave with one thing, I would hope it would be that you would see that our team approach that we've created here, which is victim-centered, will provide the best results, not only for the prosecution or the police, but for the victim advocates, and the community as a whole.